Greetings, fratres and sorors, and welcome to the Rosicrucian Wednesday teleconference. My name is Ese Magege, and I'll be your presenter for this session. Last week, about the same time, we presented on the part one of this presentation, Evolving Happiness. And I hope that you were able to apply the principles discussed in your relationships. At the end of today's session, we would open up the room for discussion. And I would like to hear how you apply the principles and what feedback or what results you got. And then also, we'd like to also hear what your relationships, or if you do have challenges in your relationship, you would like to discuss it and reflect, brainstorm together. Feel free and to come on camera. We'd love to hear your story. We'd love to brainstorm together. So without further ado, let us jump into the exciting content we have for you today. So give me a moment to share my slides. I hope you could all see this. Okay, awesome. So today we're going to be talking about evolving happiness, practical ways to increase happiness, part 2. Last week, we did the part 1, as I said earlier, and I will quickly summarize what we talked about last week for the newcomers who were not there. That way we bring everyone to speed. So we talked about the Harvard study on adult development. It's the longest longitudinal study on adult development. It's greater than 80 years and it's still ongoing. And this study showed that positive relationships were major contributors to a happy life. And this aligns with our Rosicrucian teachings because from a spiritual perspective, in positive relationships, we are expressing the positive quality of the universe, commonly referred to by Rosicrucians as the light. We also discussed that to attain lasting happiness is to nurture positive relationships and to do regular meditation and cosmic attunement. We also talked about our personality can hinder the expression of our soul and of the virtues of our soul and prevent us from having positive relationships. We talked about the qualities of a good relationship, which are understanding, patience, generosity, and so on, which are actually virtues of the soul. We also talked about the true purpose of a relationship, which is to realize the soul. We talked about spiritual principles for harmonizing our relationships. We also talked about the spiritual benefits of a good relationship. In today's session, we're going to be diving deeper into consciousness and how we create our relationships and the conditions of our relationship. So, fratres and sorors, if you are holding a cup of coffee, when someone comes along and accidentally bumps into you and causes you to spill the coffee everywhere, and you were asked, why did you spill the coffee? What would you say is the reason you spilled the coffee? Is it because someone bumped into you? Is that right? Well, wrong answer. If that's what you said, the answer is, you spilled the coffee because coffee was in your cup. If tea had been in it, you would have spilled tea. Whatever is inside the cup is what will come out. Therefore, when life comes along and shakes you, whatever is inside of you will come out. So each of us, we have to ask ourselves, what is in my cup? When life gets bumpy, what spills over? Is it joy, gratefulness, peace, humility? Or is it anger, bitterness, harsh words, and reaction. We choose what's in our cup. This is a story titled, What's in My Cup? I found it online and I loved it. I thought it was very appropriate for our discussion today. So what's in my cup? We are going to be looking at what's in our cup, what's in our consciousness as it pertains to relationship. How do we create our relationships? We will explore consciousness and the various levels of consciousness. We will look at our expressions, our mental and physical expressions, and we'll identify and eliminate factors that hinder the expressions of our divine qualities in our relationships. We would also explore our practices that we use to keep attuned to our higher self, such as our study and applications of spiritual knowledge and our meditation practice. So before we go on, I would like to open the chat and get your response on what are those tools that you use to keep positive in a very negative situation? What do you do? What are those practices? What are those tools? I would like you to share with us today what those are. So we'll open the chat. If you could type your responses. I'll allow a few seconds for that. And I will read off your responses as we get there. So the question is, what are those practices or tools we use to keep ourselves positive in a negative situation? Okay, someone said, I remain happy, conscious breathing, faith, silence, breath control, silence again, prayers, with humor. I like that. Detachment, meditation and prayers, positive self-talk, breath work, meditation. Very good. I love all of this. Remembering I am here to bring light. Amazing. Focus and visualization on my end goals. Peace profound, deep breathing, and light waterfall. Take a second to step back before I react. Practicing meditation. Amazing. Gratitude affirmations. Okay. Remembering and refocusing on uplifting experiences of the cosmic. Beautiful. Do we first strive to make our relationship with the cosmic then with others? Okay, remembering I belong. Okay, amazing. Okay, so these are all great responses. We're going to close the chat now. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So let us talk about some spiritual principles for harmonizing relationships. We talked about this in session 1. I'm going to do a refresher. So these are principles that we can remind ourselves of when we are undergoing or facing a negative situation. And it's not only negative situations, also positive situations to keep, it's a reinforcer to remain, to think positive and remain and do positive and do good. So first is remembering that consciousness acts on matter and matter reacts on consciousness. Our consciousness of things is the most relevant and not the things themselves. All that comes into physical manifestation is first patterned in the mind. We are spiritually one, and happiness is as a result of the good we do. So why is this important? Why are these principles helpful? So knowledge of this principle will allow us to be less reactive to external events, and it allow us to travel within to find the root cause and solutions to our challenges. So let us do a practical, let's take an example, and we'll see how these principles are applied in real life, right? So this is a case study, and actually this was a case that I was involved with, and I would discuss what principles are used in this case. So a medical provider, that was me, was notified of a patient who was refusing oxygen despite his low oxygen levels. On arriving at the bedside, the patient informed the medical provider that he felt tied down by the oxygen cords and other monitoring cords, and therefore did not want the oxygen. First of all, is this a relationship? Right, the title of our presentation is, happiness, evolving happiness, true, and we're focusing on relationships. So is this a relationship? It is a relationship. So what relationship? I mean, more specifically, it's a provider-patient relationship. Can the principles be used? Yes, it is a relationship. It can be used. Now, the issue here is the patient didn't want the oxygen because he felt tied down, that the cords of the oxygen made him feel tied down. Not just the cords of the oxygen, the other monitor cords made him feel tied down. So before I got on board, multiple attempts were made by previous staff to enforce compliance, but that was not successful. Not either short term, the patient might accept it for a short time, and then he takes it off. When I got to the bedside, he was very frustrated, and he was expressing his frustration in not very nice ways, which I understood. The more he talked about it to explain himself, the more he got frustrated. So it could be challenging when you're in a situation and you're in the middle of expressions of anger, right? People are expressing anger and you're in the middle of that. So, and that's really what I walked into. And the first thing I did, and not that I did this consciously, I listened to him, and he kept telling me what the issue was. And to him, the feeling of being tied down was more significant to him than keeping the oxygen on, that would give him air, right? He was actually laboring, trying to catch his breath. And you could see he was struggling. But despite that, the feeling of tied down was of more significance to him. So how do we go past that? What I did was first address the feeling of being tied. That's the reason why he's not compliant. I feel tied down. And you will understand what it feels like to feel tied down. So it was an understanding. I understood where he was coming from. It is a horrible situation to feel tied down, right? So it was a deep understanding. And at the end of the day, I was patient, like even through as he was describing his frustration and expressing his frustration, I kept in my mind saying to myself, thank you, Cosmic, for giving me the patience to persist through this. I did not judge him, right? So this lasted for about 30 minutes, our conversation, as I tried to negotiate with him. And I said, at the end, I was able to negotiate with him. I said, okay, we'll take off all the other cords, but if we can leave the oxygen cord or just one cord, would that be okay? And he agreed. And for the rest of the 12-hour shift, he was compliant with the oxygen and he was at peace. So this gave me, but for me, this experience was a blissful experience for me, because the level of understanding at which I can't even describe it. It's like a deep, profound understanding that engulfed me, and it was a blissful experience for me. And not only that, the observers, the other staff who were observing the situation were also impacted by this. So I was impacted, the patient was impacted, the staff were impacted as well. And today I'm telling you about the story. So you see how the impact spreads. So the tools that I use here is patience, understanding, and non-judgment. Like the entire time, he was frustrated and expressing his frustration because of the way he felt tied down. I remained positive, right? I kept reaffirming, thank you, Cosmic, for giving me the patience, right? Giving me the patience to persist through this, right? So we are going to go into details in the next couple of slides, exactly how to apply these principles and what these principles are. So first off, let's look at how we create relationships in the first place. What is consciousness? Our teachings define consciousness as manifestation. It's mind manifests consciousness. So mind only manifests consciousness. And consciousness or awareness brings the things of the world into focus and provides an object and direction upon which mind can act. So I'll read that slowly. Mind only manifests as consciousness. And consciousness brings the things of the world into focus and provides an object and a direction upon which mind can act. There are various levels of consciousness. Mind is dual in its function. There is the great divine mind, which is directly related to the cosmic, and within us constitutes the subconscious. Within us, this constitutes the subconscious. And then we have the lower levels of the subconscious, which is the subjective and the objective levels. And the objective is what we use to experience the outer world. The subjective has higher faculties and functions such as the will, recollection, memory, reasoning, and so forth. But why is this important? Why do you need to know this? It is important because it is within our consciousness that we construct our ideas, our purpose, and our aspiration. It is within our consciousness that we construct our ideals, our purpose, and aspiration. Our consciousness is a cross-section of what we really are at any particular time. Our consciousness is really who we are. So it is important also to know the consciousness and the levels of the consciousness, because it is by uniting our thinking with our consciousness and mind of the universe that we attune ourselves and become part of it, and therefore happier, healthier, and therefore live happier, healthier, and more peaceful lives. So I will repeat that slowly because I think these words are very powerful. So by our knowledge of consciousness and the various levels of consciousness allows us to unite, because remember the objective, and we'll talk about this in detail. The objective consciousness is what we use to experience the external world. And we want to really be reorienting and refocusing that objective consciousness to who the true owner is, right? The divine. So it is by uniting our thinking with the consciousness and mind of the universe that we attune ourselves and become part of it, and therefore happier, healthier, and therefore live happier, healthier, and more peaceful lives. Okay? So to reemphasize, we create our relationship through our ideals, our purpose, and our aspirations, reflected on consciousness. Our ideals and our purpose are the motivating factors or influence that lead us to certain directions and make us do certain things. So let's see if we can tease out what our ideals and purposes are, why we do what we do. So let's take a moment to reflect. What is our ideal relationship? We could take a pen and paper. It's really important that we do this exercise because this is how we really get to know, the reasons why we do what we do. So what is our ideal relationship? Let's start with that. Let's take a moment to just write that down, what our ideal relationship is. And while we're doing that, let us also list the key people with whom we have challenges with. So for instance, our co-workers, maybe it's a co-worker that make us, feel frustrated or annoyed. Or it is a sibling that we have a hard time with, or a parent, or a daughter, a son, a next door neighbor. Just write down who this person is. You don't necessarily have to write the name down if you don't want to. You could say next door neighbor, or you could say co-worker, or daughter one, daughter two. Well, let's write that down. Let's at least list about five people who we do have challenges with. And if you don't have up to 5, that's fine. You list 3. So 3 to 5. Let's list at least 3 to 5 people we have challenges with. And then let us list the qualities that we want to develop. So the positive qualities we want to develop. So it could be compassion. Maybe we want to be compassionate, or more forgiving, or more understanding. Let's pick a quality that way we're not too strong. That's our weakness. Okay, let's pick a quality that we're weak in. And that's what we want to develop. So more understanding, more forgiveness, more compassion. Pick that. So let's say for me, if I pick a coworker, I did an example here, coworker, and the virtue I want to develop is compassion, more compassionate. I randomly picked this, more compassionate. And we also want to pick a positive attitude that will enable us feel more compassionate, right? So for instance, let's say if this coworker is someone who frustrates us, right? Whether their actions or their speech frustrates us, and we want to show more compassion for them. We have to pick a mental attitude that when this person comes at us and says these frustrating things, we are in a non-judgment zone, right? So it's like openness, for instance. Okay, I will be open. I would not judge this person for what they're saying to me. So the mental attitude allows us to reorient our mind inwards, right? To the positive nature of the soul. So that's the whole purpose for this, right? Picking a mental attitude. And then we also want to pick a positive action as well. And the action allows us to express the virtues, right, or bring the virtues into physical manifestation. So, for instance, that action, is keeping with the same example, a co-worker, if I'll say a co-worker that makes me frustrated, I would say my action would be stop negative speech, stop talking about this co-worker, and their, and their negative actions. Stop that, stop gossip. So we're going to do this for the 3 to 5 people we've listed. And after that, we'll make a firm resolution to stick to this list for a period of time. Okay. And one thing to mention here is that the qualities we want to develop keeps changing. So let's say, for instance, in the next week, let's say we want to do this for 3 months. In another 3 months, we might want to develop another virtue. It might be forgiveness, for instance, right? So we'll do the same thing again. We'll pick people that we want, people who are difficult to forgive. We'll do that and then pick the quality. It's forgiveness. The mental attitude would be, I like openness a lot, so, or non-judgmental. I use that a lot for my mental attitude. But you could pick anything. The mental attitude could also be compassion. Could be compassion as well. And then you pick up a positive action to support that mental attitude that you want to maintain. Okay. Everyone good with this? And you have lots of time to ask questions at the end. Okay. We're going to move on. Oh, before we move on, why is doing this exercise important? It is important because it allows us to tease out what our ideals are. So why we do what we do. So let's say, for instance, in a negative situation where the action is, gossip or negative speech about the person, right? The reason I'm doing the negative speech about the person is obviously what I think about the person. I think the person is, frustrating, and the thoughts and, and all of that about the person. So we project what we think of the other person. And it's usually the reason for our actions, and is the reason why we relate poorly to that person. You can understand, because of what we think of them. So by doing these exercises, it allows us to do the opposite, to express the virtues. And usually when we do express the virtues, that is when we actually change in the situation. That is when we're actually making big impacts. And we also elevating that person as well. We're going to move on. As Edgar Cayce said, each of us have the opportunity to consciously decide who we wish to become, as well as how long it is going to take us to get there. So it comes down to knowing ourselves. Know thyself. So there are essential factors that we need for growth in our relationship, for continuous growth in our relationship. And it comes down to 3 pillars. I categorize this into 3 pillars. One is knowledge, acquiring knowledge. Without knowledge, it's very difficult to grow. There is a saying, we do better when we know better. So in our relationships, there should be a continuous practice, continuous practice where we're able to attain knowledge. And for me, the spiritual knowledge is the most impactful. So we want to make sure that we're devoting time to our spiritual knowledge. And the other pillar would be remover of the inner barriers, or what we call individuality, because individuality or the ego. So when we say individuality, just remembering the process of evolution, being in this individual body, we tend to forget that we are one spiritually. And when we separate ourselves from this oneness, we tend to do things. I'll say ideals tend to be very focused on self. Like for instance, if I were to do something, I would consider myself first before I would consider others. So it's like, how is this going to benefit me, right? Before I consider how it's going to benefit others. So it's that shift that we have to do, right? From individual thinking to a more collective thinking. And that constant work to reduce to remove the inner barriers, it's something that should be done continuously. So that's the second pillar. So removal of inner barriers. What are we doing? Are we doing daily reflections and self-corrections? And how often are we doing that? What are those practices that we do to remove those inner barriers and elevate the ego? So oneness with the divine. The other pillar is oneness with the divine and natural laws. What are those practices that we do to keep in oneness with all of creation? So how often do we meditate? So I would say take some time now and assess yourself on these three pillars. Spiritual knowledge, how much time are we giving to our spiritual studies? 2, how much time are we given to practices that enable us, that help us remove our inner barriers, reduce our ego, reduce our selfish thoughts? How often are we doing these things? And then the third pillar is how often are we meditating or practices that keep us in oneness with the divine and the natural laws? So let's assess ourselves on these three pillars and kind of also note where we need work. Where do we need more work? I'll give us a few minutes. Do that. Okay, we're going to move on. So to summarize what we have discussed so far, will be discussed including part 1 and part 2. We can summarize it, take home. In creating lasting happiness in our relationships, what are those things that we need to do? 1, realize that the purpose of a relationship is to evolve towards realizing the soul. In relationships, our mental attitudes and actions should be turned inwards towards realizing the soul. We should always do good, as evident in the saying, love thy neighbor as thyself. And we should always express the virtues of the soul unconditionally. We should acquire and apply spiritual knowledge regularly for continuous growth. And then lastly, we want to do regular cosmic attunement. We want to do meditation to attune with the cosmic. So friends and sorors, we're going to do a meditation on the virtue of love. So please sit relaxed. And place your hands on your thighs on clasps. Your feet should be slightly apart. Take several deep breaths and relax each part of your body as you breathe in and out. If you have a meaningful vowel sound, repeat it 3 to 7 times. And after which, you may ascend to your celestial sanctum. For new members, the celestial sanctum is that field of cosmic energy, that high level of spirituality, the cosmic meeting place as you visualize it. It could be a beautiful landscape, a cathedral, or a rosicrucian temple. However you choose to visualize the celestial sanctum, enter it. See yourself and feel yourself in the most sacred place. Feel that you are in oneness with all of creation and with the divine mind. Feel your mind opening to the divine and feel that there is no separation. Now visualize a bright light just above your head. See this light entering your head and filling your entire body. Silently say, universal love is mine. 3 times. See and feel the bright light illuminating and rejuvenating every cell in your body. Now remain receptive for any impressions you may receive. If it pleases the cosmic, it is done. So mote be. When you're ready, you may open your eyes.